Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Peter K here, but you can call me your finance VT. Now in today's video, I'm going to be touching on toxic cultural ideas and habits about money and really showing you ways that you can unlearn ideas that you have found to become toxic and ideas that are really not helping you to develop, to thrive, and to meet your goals. Now culture is one of those things that has a massive influence on us. And typically when we think of culture, we think of our nationality, but this is not always the case. There are many different types of cultures that we can have in our lives that have an influence on us. And what I want to do actually is really share the definition of culture with you so you can kind of get a bit more of an idea of what I mean when I say that. So let me just read you the definition. So culture is the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. So this does not, like I said before, necessarily just mean your nationality. Of course, your nationality, I'm Jamaican, that may have an influence on me and how I think and how I manage my finances and how I navigate through life as a whole. But there are also other cultures which influence my life. So as you can see from the definition, the idea of culture can be linked to a lot of different aspects of our lives. We can have a particular culture in our family of how we manage our finances, of how we operate in relationships. We can also have a specific culture in our religion, in our place of worship, in our workplace, in our family, in our friendship groups. So as you can see, culture spans across a lot of the different aspects of our lives. It's not just solely your nationality. Maybe initially when you thought of culture, you thought of where you were born or where you grew up or where your family's from. But as we can see from the definition, culture is a lot more than just where you are from on paper. So let's get into it. So this topic is really important because a lot of the times our ideas come from our culture, and this influences us in terms of the way that we think and the way that we make our decisions. So I want to get into some toxic cultural ideas that I have heard growing up myself, not necessarily directly in my family, but with people I've interacted with. I've had the pleasure of being around a plethora of people across my lifetime, in school, college, going to college outside of where I lived. I was able to interact with a lot of different kinds of people. Also starting work from quite a young age, I was able to interact with people from different cultures. And a lot of the things that I'll share with you are things that I have picked up from other people, things that I've heard in passing conversations, things that I've been told from clients since I've started my coaching. So a lot of these are actually ideas that people really do think. I did not make these up. These are brought from real people. So let me get into some of these ideas with you. Now, one of the toxic cultural ideas that I want to start with is having a high consumption lifestyle. I've seen in a lot of cultures, having a high consumption lifestyle is a part of the culture. This whole idea of always having everything new, always buying new clothes. It's like every single month you have to buy new clothes. There's this push and this desire and this need to always be buying, to always be purchasing things, even if you can't afford it. And this is very dangerous because it leads you to living above your means. And if you grew up in a household that was a high consumption lifestyle, you're always buying, there was always this culture of buying. Perhaps there wasn't really a lot of savings within your family. That wasn't really a part of the financial plan for the money management of the family. But there was always high consumption. There was always a lot of purchasing, whether it was cash or on card or even financing things. If you grew up seeing a lot of that and having that around you, it's quite likely that you're probably going to continue the same thing. And one thing that I found in a lot of high consumption households is that sometimes what you're consuming is not actually what you can afford. There are a lot of people that are using credit and different forms of credit to fund their lifestyle, to fund their habits. And this can become very dangerous because typically high consumption households tend to also have high levels of debt. And this is very toxic as well because sometimes in a lot of cultures, everything's about appearances. You've got to look the part. You've got to have the name brand clothes, or you need to shop at a particular place. You need to be able to show up and show that you're doing well, even if you're not. And I think sometimes that pressure of fitting in, that pressure of not wanting to be the gossip at the next family party or the next event that's happening within your community can push people to have this high consumption lifestyle that they can't truly afford or actually keep up with in a healthy way. So this is something that is very toxic because, like, as I said before, it leads you to spend beyond your limits, beyond what you can afford. And if this is what your child has grown up seeing, they're probably going to copy the same thing. If you grew up always having designer or being accustomed to a certain lifestyle, typically that's what you're going to want to desire for yourself, especially if it was one that brought you joy, it made you happy, it made you popular, that's going to be something that's going to be very important to you. So that's one idea that is very toxic. And I thought it'd be great to kind of start with that and segue into some other points. Now, another very, very toxic cultural idea is the idea that you don't need to save. You know, life is short. Now, for some people that this is very different to you, maybe that was never said in your culture, there are actually cultures where they think that saving is like, if you save, it shows you're not trusting God, or if you save, it's like, you know, you're actually expecting something bad to happen. And this is not the case. To save is to be wise. You know, life can be very unpredictable. If we've learned nothing from the pandemic, is that has shown us in itself that life can be unpredictable. And finances is something that things aren't always going to be secure. Maybe the job you have today or you've had for the last 10 years, that doesn't mean you're going to have it for the next 10 years. Things can change within that business, within your sector. And again, if an emergency arises, what will you use to get you through that difficult time? This is why it's important to save, not only for emergencies, but also to fund big purchases and large purchases that you want to make. Saving towards goals that you may have. Savings gives you something to work towards. It gives you something to actually motivate you and keep you going. Sometimes when I feel like, oh, can't be bothered, I remember the things that I'm working towards. I remember the goals that I have, and that gives me that drive, that push to keep going. So yeah, that idea that you don't need to save, life is short, you know, live as you should, and you know, it's going to be okay. Now, even the idea, you know, God will provide, that is true, God will provide, but I do also notice that sometimes people use that as an excuse to be ignorant. Sometimes people use that as an excuse to not take control of their finances, to not make wise, informed decisions, because they're thinking that, oh yeah, God will provide, so I don't need to save. It's going to be, God will provide. And that's not the case. You need to be wise. Yes, God will provide, but you also need to use wisdom as well when you manage your finances. You also need to be a good steward as well. And sometimes people hide behind that idea and they use it as an excuse to mismanage their money. So yeah, that might trigger a few people. You may not agree, but that is my humble opinion. God will provide, but you have to do your part. Period. Next one. Another thing that I've heard a lot of people say is that our people can only achieve X. So maybe within your culture, there's this idea that you can only achieve at a certain level. There's a glass ceiling for your people, whether that's because of your race, where you're from, or the financial status of your family. That idea that, you know, our people can only do this. We can't do that because that doesn't happen for our people. That's toxic, because when you grow up thinking that you can only do so much, you box yourself in. You may even have certain dreams that you don't allow to develop. You don't even invest in them because you don't truly believe they can happen. And this is toxic. One thing that I'm really, really happy about with how I grew up was that I've always been a big thinker. I've always been someone that's been very ambitious from a young age. If you ask me what I wanted to do, I had a long list of things. And my mom nurtured that. She never said to me that you can't do it. If I said to my mom, I want to be an astronaut, she'd be like, you can do it. If you put your mind to it, you can do it. And I always had that encouragement growing up. I never had anyone say to me directly in my family that you can't do that. You know, it was always encouraged to dream, was always encouraged that you can do whatever you put your mind to. And this helped me to become the woman I am today. Because when I think about my mindset and I think about my abilities, I've never really struggled with believing in myself in terms of my abilities. Now, in terms of like body image, I struggled with that for a long time, especially in my early teens. But in terms of actually believing in my abilities and what I was able to achieve, that was never really something I struggled with, because as I said, growing up, I was able to nurture that. I was able to dream. I was able to believe in myself and that I could do anything I put my mind to. Whereas if I'd grown up in a culture or a household that said that, no, you know, our people can only do X, that would have been me too. So that's another cultural idea and habit that can be very toxic. When people around you are small-minded and they say to you, oh no, you can't do that. You can't start a business, or you can't be in that particular career. That's not for you. People in our culture don't do that. Toxic. Another one as well is retail therapy. We've all heard it. And I think in some levels that is in most cultures, especially Western cultures, and it's toxic. If you are down, if you're feeling sad or you're happy about something, your initial reaction shouldn't always be to spend. that can be dangerous, because then it becomes a habit, it becomes a routine for you. And as you know, as humans, we're people of routines. We've got habits. You wake up in the morning, you have your morning routine, more or less, that you do the same every single day. And if in your mind you program yourself that every time something bad happens, you need to spend, you need retail therapy to make you feel better, that's going to become a source of dependence that you have. And a lot of people, because they haven't learned how to manage their emotions, because they haven't learned how to manage their emotions in a healthy way, in a way that is not going to lead them to create other problems in other aspects of their lives, they rely on retail therapy. And as a result, the retail therapy leads to debt, leads to other issues. It leads to, even infidelity, financial infidelity in relationships, because maybe you make certain purchases that you can't afford and you don't tell your partner about it. So as you can see, sometimes retail therapy, especially when it's excessive or it's at a level that is unaffordable or unachievable long term, it becomes problematic. So that in itself is also another toxic cultural idea. If you need therapy, get talking therapy, get real therapy. Retail therapy should not be your go-to every time you're sad or every time something good happens to you. That's another toxic cultural idea, and that also feeds into that consumer culture. There is nothing wrong with being a consumer. I am a consumer. I buy things as well, but one thing that I intend on being is being a savvy consumer, not a victim of consumerism. So that's something to think about and really assess for yourself. Am I a victim of consumerism? How do you measure that? If you're in high consumer debt, if you have constant money worries, if you always feel that you need to purchase things to keep up with everyone else, that makes you a victim of consumerism. But again, if you're a consumer, we're all consumers to some degree, but do not be a victim of consumerism. Now, another toxic cultural idea is this idea of just being disorganized when it comes to your finances. This idea of, if you pay a bill late here and there, it's okay. It's not that deep. It's okay, and I've seen that in a lot of cultures, there's a lack of responsibility when it comes to finances. You may even be financially responsible for certain things, but with certain bills, you may feel like, it's okay. If you don't pay it, it's not so bad. It is. It is so bad, because what's going to happen if you have a pattern of paying your bills late or not paying them at all? You're not only damaging your reputation, you're damaging your credit, because that is going to be recorded. Something that some people don't realize is that when you miss a payment, especially persistent payments, there is a record that is kept of that on your credit report. And maybe that's the reason why you try to take things out in your name and it never goes through, because again, you have bad credit. And this typically happens when you pay your bills late or you do not pay them at all. So be wary of that toxic idea that you may have within your culture, within your friendship group, your family, that you pay a couple of bills late here and there, it's okay. Or if you maybe prioritize other financial things, but you think, the bills can wait, have a think about that, because the damage you're going to have long term is really not worth it. Pay your bills on time. Make sure the bills that you have are affordable for you, and pay them on time. Be a person of your word. If you signed up to a contract, make sure you pay those bills on time. Okay. Another toxic habit that I've found within a lot of cultures, and I think it's something that people don't realize that they have, is this habit of blaming everyone for the condition of your life. Now, I personally could blame a lot of different factors for my life and say, my life is like this because of da. But something I've learned is that we have to take accountability for our lives. Yes, there may be injustices, there may be inequalities, there may be certain things that have happened to you that were not fair, that were not right. But you have to decide that you are going to take control of your life. You are going to take control of your finances. If you're constantly blaming the government, blaming the fact that your particular race or background or financial status for why your life is the way it is, it's never going to change, because all of those factors are outside of yourself. Those factors are nothing that you can control. You can't control people's prejudices. You can't control people's ideas, but you can control yourself. And a lot of people have gotten themselves into financial pits, like I like to call it, not just because of other people, but because of yourself. But it's easier to blame someone else. It's easier to shift the blame to other people than it is to really sit down and be like, do you know what? This is kind of my fault. If I had done this differently, things would have been different. So don't allow yourself to become that person that's constantly blaming others for your situation. If you're not happy with your finances, look at ways that you can change your situation. And if you don't know where to start, get some help. Okay, that's it. But do not continue to blame people for the reason why you don't have savings, the reason why you're not where you want to be right now. Because listen, we can all look for people to blame, but until you take responsibility, nothing will change. Be accountable for your life and the progress of it. Another idea, which is very toxic, is the idea that you have to go to university to be successful, or you have to have a particular career in order to be successful. Now, let me clarify. Going to university for some people can really be a massive bonus to your career and your life in general. But you need to study a course that, one, you want to actually study, two, that course is going to add value to your life, and three, that course is going to allow you to transfer that into a career that's actually going to be sustainable for you. So many people go to university because they have to, family pressure, they ain't got no choice, because their culture says you have to go to university, or simply because they're following a career that their parents want them to actually follow. A lot of parents are living vicariously through their children. And that is also quite toxic, because you have people that are doctors and lawyers or gynecologists that hate their job, but they're doing it because they were pushed into it by fire or force, but they didn't want to actually do it. So that's another thing as well. If you're going to go to university, great, but make sure you're going with the right intentions. If you're going to study a degree for 3 years and get into debt, make sure you're doing that because that's actually what you want to do. If you're going to pursue a certain career, don't just look at the money. Yes, that is important. However, ensure that it's a career you're actually going to enjoy, because once you start working, you're practically at work more than you are at home. You got to take holidays to enjoy your life. So definitely make sure that you pick a career that you're actually going to enjoy, that you want to do, not simply because your culture is saying you have to do that. So many people are unhappy in their careers, and maybe they're even good at what they do, but they hate it because that choice was removed from them, or because they allowed other people to influence them. So definitely think about that too. Now, this next idea is the whole idea that more money is going to solve all your problems. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. If I had some more money, I'd be very, very happy. But the truth of the matter is there are certain problems in your life that more money will not solve. If you're someone that doesn't have a money management strategy, or the only money management strategy you know is to spend, having more money is not going to solve your financial problems. If anything, they're going to make them even bigger, because now you have more money, you can spend even more, and you can possibly get yourself into even more debt. So this idea that, if I just had more money, that's going to solve all my problems, it's not always true. Until you learn to manage what you have right now, having more is not going to help you. And you may hear that and you think, no, Peter K, that's not true. I need more. Maybe what you have right now is not enough. But if you can learn how to manage that, how to multiply and stretch that small budget, as you start getting more money, you're going to see how much more you can do with that. This was something I didn't learn for myself. When I started off in my career, I spent that little. As I started to grow, earning a lot more money, what was I doing? Spending more money. And that was because I didn't have a proper plan in place. I didn't have a financial plan. I didn't have a proper strategy. My strategy was to enjoy life and spend. And that did not get me anywhere. Thankfully, I didn't get into debt, but I could have spent my money a lot better. But that's my point. Have a plan for your money. Have a strategy for your money. Have a budget in place. Some people don't like the word budget, but have a budget in place. Know your expenses. Know your numbers, first and foremost. What are your expenses? What are your financial commitments? How much can you afford to save each month? How much can you afford to invest each month? And really have a plan for how you want to spend your money. Because if you don't tell your money what to do with itself, the shops will tell you what to do with your money, and you're going to find yourself always in this rabbit hole of the same thing over and over. So definitely having a plan for your money is essential. It's a must. I think one of the biggest toxic cultural ideas about money is a scarcity mindset. It's this idea that there's not enough money to go around. It's difficult to be wealthy. It's difficult to build wealth. It is. I'm not going to say it's easy. It is a challenge, but it is possible. I think one of the biggest reasons for these toxic ideas is ignorance. The lack of knowledge on finances and how to build wealth and how to effectively manage your money is something that causes a lot of these toxic ideas to really grow within communities, because again, you learn something, you think it's right, you pass it down to someone else, and it's just this revolving door of these ideas that keeps getting passed on that's not helping anyone to move forward. So ignorance is another thing. Like I said before, some people, there's that culture of blaming everyone, but one thing I've learned in this life is that I need to educate myself. We can all sit here and say, oh, they should have taught us this in school. but that probably wasn't their intention. They don't want to teach you that. So you have to take responsibility for your knowledge, for your life, and learn the things you didn't learn. If you don't know how to manage your money, I've got videos on budgeting you can check out for free. You know, if you're watching this video, you can definitely check out those videos too and learn how you can start getting in control of your money. So ignorance is one of the biggest things. And also this idea that investing is for the rich. And to invest, you need to have a lot of money. This was an idea that I subscribed to for a very, very long time until I learned about 2 years ago that that wasn't the case. You know, it's so much easier now. Now we're at a time where knowledge is there. If you want it, you can search for it. There are more coaches and advisors popping up all over the place. And also we have the internet. Free resources are there that can teach you a lot of the things that you need to know. So again, ignorance. Don't allow ignorance to be something that holds you back, that keeps you stuck, that keeps you in that glass ceiling, but also educate yourself on the things that you want to know that are going to help you to thrive in life and in your finances as well. Now, I've got 2 more toxic ideas to dive into before I wrap up this video. And the first one is about weddings. In a lot of cultures, there's this idea that you need to have a big, extravagant wedding, which is all well and good if you can afford it. But one thing I've learned in this life is that you need to adjust what you're planning to what you can afford. And there are many people that they get into debt when they're getting married in order to meet cultural expectations, in order to make their family happy. But then you're the one that's carrying that debt for the next couple of years. And especially going into a marriage with debt that you've incurred together to pay for one day, not even one day, less than 24 hours, is not always the best financial decision to make, because it can also add a lot of stress to your relationship, especially if you then start having a family and then you've got the debt from the wedding, you've got children, and it just adds unnecessary stress and pressure that you don't need. So that is another toxic idea, that you need to have this big extravagant wedding. You have to invite everyone that your parents want to invite, but sometimes there's these demands, but the money is not actually given along with those demands. So that's something that can be quite toxic. And I've seen a lot of people that have gone under that pressure when they've been planning their weddings. They've had families that are stressing them out because they want to invite the whole world and they can't actually afford to accommodate that. So I definitely say, if you are engaged, you are getting married, you want to in the future, have the wedding you can afford. If you've got family members that are adding a lot of pressure to you, sometimes you really need to instill those boundaries, have those awkward conversations, and really let them know that, you know what, I can't afford this. If you want me to add this, then I'm going to need that financial support too. And you're just going to have to do it. It's not easy, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. It is your wedding after all. It's not their wedding. And the other thing as well, it comes to family. Sometimes within certain cultures, there's that pressure to have children quite young, or to have a lot of children, or have a big family. But sometimes that might not necessarily be something you want, or even something that you can afford. You know, start a family when you are ready. Start a family when you feel financially ready as well for that. Not only financially ready, but also mentally ready for that too. And if that's actually what you want for your life, because again, sometimes those ideas there's that pressure that you have to have kids. You need to have a lot of them too. I want to be a grandparent. I want 3, 4, 5 grandkids, but maybe you can only afford 1 or 2. So definitely as well, that's also another toxic cultural idea as well. The idea that you need to have a massive family, but maybe you can't sustain that. Having children, especially now, is expensive. It's very expensive. And also there's a lot of things you have to take into considerations along with your job, your career, your relationship as well. So that's something to really think about. Don't allow cultures to pressure you. Don't allow people to influence your decisions if that's not something that you want to do, but really think about whether that's best and whether you're ready to take on that responsibility. And lastly, as I wrap up, there's this toxic idea that you have to support your family. Now, there's nothing wrong with supporting your family. And when I say family, I mean your extended family. In some cultures, there's this pressure that you have to support your parents, you have to support your grandparents financially, and maybe you can't actually afford to do that. It's so important when it comes to money that you have financial boundaries. And a lot of the times when you're living in a Western country and maybe you have family that are back home, you know, wherever you're from, sometimes they can look at you and think, yeah, they have money, you know, and maybe you're sending money that you can't even afford. I've seen many times with clients that they've gotten themselves into debt to help family members back home, or to support family members that they can't actually afford to support. So another thing that's very important, especially when it comes to your culture, and if that's something that has a huge influence on you, is really, really being open and honest with your family. If you can't afford to help them, Be transparent. Don't get yourself into debt to support them, but then now you're in debt. Who's going to support who? You know, it's kind of defeating the purpose. And this also can really cause a strain on the relationship. It can cause a lot of resentment as well. And you don't want to see a certain name pop up on your phone and be rolling your eyes and be thinking, oh, what do they want? How much do they want this time? So really be transparent, really be open and honest. And if they're not receptive of that, then you need to reassess the relationship. Now, as we wrap up this video, there's 2 questions I want you to think about. If you've listened to any of these ideas, or maybe there's other ideas that you can think of that are perhaps are toxic, or you're still thinking to yourself, how can I identify whether a cultural idea that I've grown up with is toxic or not? Ask yourself the following questions. 1, what is that idea based on? Is it based on fact? Is it based on opinion? And also, whose opinion is that? You know, is that person a reputable source? Is that person someone that was good at managing their own money? Is that person's finances one that you would desire to have for yourself? If the answer is no, then you probably don't want to take advice from that particular person. And the other question is also this: will following that idea help you to achieve your financial goals? Will following that idea or that way of thinking help you to build the lifestyle that you desire for yourself? Not the one your family says you should have or society says you should have, but is one that you desire for yourself. So ask yourself those questions, and then you can assess whether those ideas you've grown up hearing are toxic or not. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you found value in it. Let me know in the comments, what are some of the toxic cultural ideas that you grew up hearing? Was there any of the ideas that I shared today that you agree with or disagree with? Let me know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, do share it with a friend, and have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in my next video.